Thank you all. The next question will begin with Mr. Jack Nelson-Pallmeyer.
Pallmeyer. You can call me Jack.
I'll get it. Jack Nelson-Pallmeyer. We are less than around 6 days away from the 6th anniversary of 9/11. In his statements on Iraq, Senator Coleman is now embracing the word that was bad for our presidential nominee, Kerry, calling his position nuanced. H.L. Mencken once said that for every complex problem there is a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. I would like your nuanced position on combating terrorism.
Well, first let me say that Al's written books, I've written a dozen books on U.S. policy over the years, and when I did a book about why the U.S. invaded Iraq, it was very interesting to me that in that document that I cited for you, they talked about terrorism, and they said, if we put these permanent military bases in the Middle East, it's going to foment terrorism. And they said, but that's okay. And the reason it was okay is because they had this great goal in mind, right? They were going to dominate the world. They just had to put this in place. So I think our approach to terrorism, we would get much further if we treated terrorism as a criminal enterprise that basically needs a lot of investigation, a lot of sharing of intelligence, and a lot of police action. When we use the war on terrorism, when we use 9/11 in this country to create a politics of fear, that has actually aggravated terrorism and undermined, I would say, the security. We have to stand up to that politics of fear. And I will say one other thing. If we want to address the issue of terrorism, I would say one of the greatest things we could do in this country would be to help make every community livable. In other words, if we had spent the money that we have spent in the war in Iraq on overcoming poverty and underdevelopment, we would be in much better shape in terms of the issue in terror. And then I will say also that I believe if we want to do something about terrorism, we need to have a better, more balanced policy in the Middle East, including in Israel-Palestine, in ways that address the security needs of the people of Israel, but also the needs of the Palestinian people. I think that would go a long way to helping reduce terrorism. Thank you.
The first responsibility of government is to defend the nation. And we need to take a look at where we're going to go with our armed forces in the 21st century. There are certain actions going on right now, places like the Philippines, Mali, Georgia, and Colombia, where we put small footprints in, where we send in special forces and other of our armed forces to wage peace, not war, to work with the locals in providing basics, water, energy, electricity. I think that's where we have to go. I think we have to start an emphasis, a re-emphasis on this type of small footprints to where we're combating the underlying causes of terrorism. Jack is right. One of the instigators of terrorism in the world today is the Palestinian issue. Israel wants a two-state resolution. Palestine wants it. That's why I so firmly believe that we have to start down the road to peace in the Middle East and have a UN Security Council resolution to start a peace conference. Because we need to address that. We need to address the underlying poverty. And that's the type of foreign policy, an enlightened foreign policy, that this nation needs. Not one that leads only with its military might, but leads with its moral might. Look what we did post-World War II with the Marshall Plan. Look what happened in Japan. This country can lead in the right direction if it has the right type of leadership. We have it. And the next thing you have to ask yourself, if we don't do that, are we going to have to go in with brute force again, like we did in Iraq, without asking the right questions? And that's the key, folks. Our armed forces get to where they are because the right questions weren't asked by our Congress when President Bush wanted to go to war in Iraq.
You know, it's so funny. I totally agree with Jack about this, treating terrorism as a police action and basing it on intelligence. And it so underlines the importance of our acting in concert with our allies around the world. You know, one of the tragedies of 9/11 was that we had the whole world behind us at 9/12. And this president had a chance to lead the world. And he didn't. He divided us. And he used it to go into Iraq. We have to work with our allies. We have to work on our allies on terrorism. We have to work on controlling disease. And we have to work on preventing failed states. That's where terrorism comes from. We have to support the Millennium Goals in the UN to eradicate extreme poverty. To make sure, you know, we could have used this money we've wasted in Iraq to make sure that every child in the world gets an elementary school education. Imagine how much more that would make, how much more secure that would be. Yes, we have to pay attention to Israel and Palestine, and I think this president has been the worst enemy of Israel because he did a foreign policy which was anything but Clinton. And Clinton was hands-on, and Israel and Palestine needs the President of the United States to be involved. And the neocons said that the road to Jerusalem was through Baghdad. Well, they got it totally wrong. They got it totally wrong, and this war in Iraq has just exacerbated everything that's going on in the Middle East.
When we talk about the nuance that is involved in terrorism, I think we need to look at the fact that terrorism does exist, and we can't bury that under the table. It exists. There are forces that wish to destroy democratic institutions and even the democratic part of the world, such as the United States. And we need to be strong in counter-terroristic activities. I agree with Jack, I agree with each of the speakers, that there are so many different underlying causes. We need to be a strong America, but we need to be a humble America in cooperation with our allies in terms of convening the International Peace Conference there and recognize where are terrorists and where aren't terrorists. We can't impose our form of government or our form of democracy in each and every part of the world where we go. In doing that, in recognizing that there's terrorism, I think we need to also recognize what we've done. We've created the situation of terrorism. We destroyed the Iraqi society. We've killed over 200,000 Iraqis. We have over 100,000 people that are going out every month out of the country. Let's take a look at what's really happening. We've brought Al-Qaeda to power and recognized it as something more than it really exists. It's not, Nazi Germany. It's not the kind of force that we really need to put up hundreds of thousands of troops for, but rather in a very targeted way. In terms of bringing in the Middle East, absolutely. We need a two-state solution, and every party recognizes that. And we need to do this in a way which not only works with our allies, but with our adversaries. We've always worked with our adversaries. Bring in Syria, bring in Iran, bring in Turkey, bring in Egypt, as I said, and take a look in a targeted way at those who are anxious to engage in terrorism.
All right, thank you.